You don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowing like sis. Dead up perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look up better pull out the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the first part of What If Deku and Hero Academia joins Onepunchman. Special note, this fanfic is written in a masterpiece of Spark 3 on fanfictionnet. Do check and support the author too. Now smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Izuku was wrong. He thought that separating himself from his classmates was enough to draw Shigaraki away from the ones he loves most. That if he struck out on his own, they would follow him to the ends of the earth to take one for all from him. He was wrong. All for One wasn't taking any chances this time. He wanted this generational game of cat and mouse to end permanently. Like each of the 8 holders of One for All before him, they all actively opposed the All for One rule. One for All was the one thing that he feared could stop him. It did stop him once before with All Might, and if it could happen once, it could happen again. Izuku mused that, unlike the previous holders, One for All had a significant advantage over himself. He knew who he was and who his friends and family were, and thanks to the news, he knew exactly where to find them. Thanks to a conference held by the heroes after the climactic battle with the Hero Liberation Front, all parents related to the incident were relocated into the UA dorms along with his very own. Normally, this wouldn't have been causing much concern. UA is one of the safest places in all of Japan. But there was another outcome of that climatic battle. It was not only the deaths of some pro-heroes, one of whom was Midnight herself, one of his former teachers at UA. The mere thought already brought up bad memories and made his heart throb a bit. The devastation wrought by the Gigantamacia rampage crushed the morale of several pro-heroes still in service, causing a number of them to retire on the spot or in the following weeks. Their morals were not the only ones that were crushed that day. Most civilians stopped believing in heroes altogether and relied on their quirks and support items to defend themselves. But this would only cause more damage to the surrounding area by the time the fight drew to a close. Heroes were stretched too thin to cover conflicts happening in too many places, and to make matters worse, All for One would have a host of potential allies scattered about by all the chaos and some of the most dangerous criminals freed from the Todoroki side. Even worse, All for One had sent assassins to capture Midoriya, though none of them posed much of a challenge besides Lady Nagant, a former pro-hero. Inadvertently, All for One assassins and the chaotic city proved vital to Midoriya's growth. He can fully use 100% of his power without damaging himself. Using his newfound prowess combined with the 4th user's danger sense, he would dash around the city, stopping any danger or conflict wherever possible. This led to his current predicament. He was up against another of All for One's assassins, the Dictator. He can control people while they are still conscious that the only way to free them is to either hit the victim with a significant enough force or knock out the Dictator himself. Izuku cursed himself for his current suit, which lacked the Air Force gauntlets needed for long-range attacks. He was rushed by a mob of citizens, all screaming and begging for him to not hurt them and save them. He was immediately surrounded, wondering what to do, when suddenly a blonde-haired teen leaped from nowhere, and immediately Midoriya knew who he was. Bakugou's AP shot immediately hit the Dictator and knocked him out. All the civilians once under his control began to thank the heroes and immediately ran away from the scene, leaving the 2 teens in silence in the empty square. The rain was coming down hard. As Bakugou looked at his childhood friend, he looked completely different from the kid he once knew, even just a few weeks ago. His body, much like his costume, was ravaged with scars, blood, and mud from the countless battles he was undertaking, and his eyes were nearly lifeless from exhaustion. Nothing was said between the 2 teens until Deku finally spoke. "Thanks for the assistance, Bakugou. I trust that you can take him to the authorities," as he pointed to the Dictator's unconscious form. "I sense more danger happening in the area, and I must go stop it." Bakugou said nothing as Deku slowly began to turn around, struggling to continue moving forward, but despite his condition, he would continue. He had to. The 4th's danger sense flared even closer this time from behind him. Fearing for his friend, Deku quickly turned around and shouted a warning to Bakugou that someone was in the area. But as he turned around to look back at his friend, he was shocked to see that the distance between the 2 shrank. Bakugou was right in his face, and he was even more worried about Bakugou's outstretched hands. But before he could move or even question Bakugou's actions, he yelled a stun grenade, and his hands exploded in a flash of light and sound. The light was blinding and the sound deafening when the force reached Deku's body. It was the last straw that broke the camel's back. Deku's shock, exhaustion, starvation, and wounds all fell on the boy at that moment, and he fell unconscious. Before his body could hit the ground, Bakugou caught him and uttered his first words to Deku since his arrival. Sleep, Midoriya. Midoriya next wakes up within the Vestige world, a dark void with the 8 other vestiges of One for All. Nothing but a large light in the center with 8 chairs sitting around it. Inside the "Yo, look who's finally awake." Midoriya looked over to see the 5th user, Degoro, speaking. "You gave us a pretty big scare there. Who would have known what would have happened if your friend didn't interfere when he did? What you were doing was pure recklessness." Another voice was interjected this time, coming from the 4th user, Hikage. Another person interjected with this one, surprising Midoriya. The 2nd user spoke and said, "If it were solely up to me, I would say you made the right decision. Given the current climate of the world and the threat that All for One and Shigaraki possess, hunting them down should be your top priority, along with mastering all the quirks in your possession to be as fully ready as possible when the fated battle comes. However, there is always time to stop and rest. If All for One did try to make a move in your previous state, you would have been nothing but a liability in battle." His tone was harsh and forward, which was immediately contrasted by the next voice, which was smoother and calmer. The 7th user, Nana, was speaking now. "The point we're all trying to make is that we're worried about you, Midoriya. The weight of One for All is a heavy burden to bear, especially now of all times, but you need to have time for yourself to succeed. This may sound selfish given the favor I've asked of you, but you can't progress towards any of your goals the way you were going." Midoriya chuckled silently to himself. Goals. I've accomplished my goal with every person I saved, every person that got home safely, and anyone that had their faith restored by my actions. Those are my goals. I'm a hero. I can't just ignore people who are in trouble because I'm tired. All for One may be the root cause of despair, but we cannot let the people fall for it. All Might before was injured gravely during his battle with One for All, but he persisted and continued to save people even when his powers were fading. Even when he only had the embers of All for One to cling to, he fought on. That is exactly what I'll do. More than ever, people need a hero to save them, and that's what I'll do. The room was silent for a moment. All of the previous vestiges of One for All were staring at Midoriya before suddenly the user Yoichi started clapping. He said, "A truly motivating speech, Midoriya. Toshinori was correct in choosing you as the next carrier of One for All. You have the very same heart and spirits that he did, maybe even more so. In the end, what happens is up to you to decide. We can only guide you on your journey, but we will always stand by what you think is right. Good luck, young hero." As his final words were said, Midoriya started to slowly regain consciousness, waking up in a hospital bed that he had seen many times before. Not surprisingly, he was in UAS nursing room, but before he was able to fully take in his surroundings, his vision was suddenly obscured by a person immediately jumping on him and hugging him tightly. As his vision became fully clear, he recognized the person instantly. It was his mother, who was crying on his shoulder. Now her voice came out choppy between the sobbing and sniffling. "I was so worried." She clung onto Midoriya tighter, almost suffocating. All Midoriya could do was return the embrace. She eventually let go and returned to the chair sitting next to him while wiping the tears from her eyes. She continued, "When All Might told me about you distancing yourself from everyone and even ditching him, I couldn't help but become even more worried about you when your classmates had finally found you and brought you back here. I was in so much shock that I nearly fell unconscious when I saw the shape your body was in." She looked Izuku dead in the eyes. "Please, I know that there are a lot of things going on with you, All Might, and your quirk, but just be more careful. At least for me. I hate to see you hurt, and I can't imagine the pain I would feel if I never got to see you again. So just be more careful from now on." Midoriya nodded his head in understanding, and she continued, "Well, I've probably talked your head off by now, and I'm sure other people would like to have a word with you as well." As she said that, she turned to the other person in the room. The skeleton of a man was in formal attire, silently watching over the small reconnection between Midoriya and his mother. "I'll go outside. I'm sure your friends would be happy to know that you're up and awake," she stated as she walked towards the door and out of the room, leaving seemingly only All Might and Midoriya there. But something felt off about the situation. He took his eyes off All Might and panned around the room, and what he saw confirmed his suspicions. There was another person in the room with them. It was none other than his homeroom teacher, Aizawa, dressed in his usual dark attire, nearly blending into the shadows of the room. But the one thing that stuck out to Midoriya was that his quirk was activated, one glowing red eye staring right at him. That's why he felt off. He no longer had danger sense constantly bombarding him with signals, just a normal peace of mind. Although he doubted that was the reason Aizawa was using it on him currently. He turned his head back to All Might, who was now standing. He approached Midoriya in bed and put both of his hands on the boy's shoulders. It's okay to take breaks, Midoriya, it's okay to take a rest. He raised his head, finally meeting the boy's eyes. I understand the pressure that you're under as my successor, the drive to want to continue to help others no matter your condition. I understand it fully. You are going down the same path I did. He softly grinned to himself, ironic that he was going through a similar conversation with Midoriya that night I had with him all those years ago, and seeing how things turned out with himself, he wanted to make sure Midoriya didn't go down a similar path he did. But you shouldn't. You need to strive to be even better than me, learn how to take breaks, and learn how to accept help from others. You idolize me, so maybe you couldn't see it, but I'm not infallible. I've made many mistakes in my time as number one, and I just wish for you to not repeat them. Midoriya sat there, digesting what everyone might have said. In response, he asked All Might one question. So do you just expect me to do nothing when someone is in danger? Because if so, I just can't do that. Even before I gained your power, all I wanted to do was help people. Now that I have power, especially yours, I might be the former number one hero for so long. I need to live up to that. As you said before, I need to show them that I am here to protect and keep them safe. Before All Might could respond, however, Aizawa finally decided to butt in, stating, there is no I when it comes to heroes. We all work together to ensure the safety of the public. While All Might be extraordinary, as his time as number one is not without the support of the other heroes around him. Now more than ever, we need to come together to support each other and not separate, which brings me to you. His stare turned into a glare at Midoriya, and suddenly his quirk turned off. Midoriya instantly felt the familiar feeling of the fourth quirk, although given the numbness of the pain, he would wager that whatever was happening was taking place far away from himself. It was barely noticeable. Your problem child violated guidelines set up for your adventure with the other pro heroes and nearly stepped into the bounds of vigilantes. Of course, before it got to that point, your classmates requested from the principal that they bring you back. You should thank them when you get the opportunity. Anyways, I'm not going to even begin to act like I understand what's going on between you and All Might. But your independent actions have caused quite a stir not just among here but among the citizens as well. To cut a long story short, from now until support from the foreign heroes arrives, you will be restricted to school grounds and only allowed out on patrols. If I'm accompanying you, you'll still get to save people, but together with everyone else. He sighed, then rubbed the back of his head as he said the last of his news. Given the incident, Nezu doesn't trust you not to wander off again, so he wants you to wear these. He stepped aside and revealed dark and gray bracelets with small spikes extended from them. At first, he was confused, but then reality dawned on him. These were all bracelets that might be used back during the finals test. Seeing Midoriya's eyes widen in understanding, Aizawa began to explain. Yes, these are quirk restraining bracelets, not that dissimilar to the ones All Might wear during your test with Bakugou. These, however, are more advanced and weighted. Once you put them on, you won't be able to take them off without the help of a signal from a device that will be in my possession along with some of your other classmates. Before you ask, some of your classmates will have this device because, along with them, you will have a rotating pair of classmates looking after you, just in case the restraints aren't enough for you to completely resist the urge to continue your pursuits. With all that being said, I'm needed elsewhere at the moment. Put these on your arms and legs, and then you are free to leave the room and mingle with the others. Aizawa left the room as well, leaving only All Might and Midoriya. The silence in the room was deafening. After a minute passed, Midoriya finally spoke. Did you know about this all? Almost immediately, All Might reply. No, not at all. I knew some sort of punishment was being discussed, but I was excluded from the conversation given my connection to you, which they believed would make me biased in my judgment. Hearing this, Midoriya nodded and thought about what he should do. He could try to escape during one of his patrols with Aizawa, using his smokescreen to cloud his vision and escape. But not only would they undoubtedly chase him down, but the danger for them and himself, distracted with each other, one of the all-for-one assassins could strike, which could lead to them being hurt or the strike, maybe even him being captured. No, 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 I can't let that happen. Midoriya thought hard about what he could do to leave again, then remembered that his classmates had convinced Nazo to take him back. Maybe, with their cooperation, they could convince him to let him go. All Might stand there listening to Midoriya mumble to himself, grinning, thinking that no matter how much he changes, he's still himself. Once his mumbling died down, Midoriya nodded to himself. All Might walked over to the bracelets and was trying to lift the bracelets but failed. He tried again with more force but failed again. He frowned to himself, turned around to Midoriya, and said, "Yeah, these things sure are weighted. I speculate that each may weigh 100 kilos or maybe more." Deku nodded and got up and walked to the bracelets, passing them all. He activated full cowling at 5% and put the bracelets on his forearms and ankles. He wanted to test the quirk suppressor and attempted to raise the percentage of one for all. He got up to around 50% before he couldn't raise it any higher before lowering it back down. They all pulled out a small device that had a red button on it and pressed it, and immediately the bracelets fell to the ground. Midoriya looked at All Might questioningly. "It would be better if you met the others. You go take a shower and dress up. The shower is through that door." He pointed to a door opposite himself and said, "You should find a change of clothes in there as well. I'll be here waiting for you." Deku nodded and thanked All Might before turning and heading in the direction of the shower. Midoriya emerged from the shower in cargo shorts and a yellow t-shirt. He picked up the bracelets and reattached them to his arms and legs. He nodded with all his might, and they both proceeded out of the room into the hallway. They began to walk out of the school towards the dorm, but not before Midoriya got to say his thanks to the recovery girl for speeding up his recovery. They began to head towards the doors of the dorm, where Midoriya began contemplating what he would say to his classmates after all this time away. His thoughts were cut off, however, with the aroma of food in the air that smelled fantastic, the smell reminding him of how he hadn't had a home-cooked meal in months. He and All Might approached and opened the door to confetti cannons popping. Midoriya shielded his eyes first, then opened them to first see a big sign that said "Welcome back," followed by seeing and hearing his classmates repeat the same phrase he saw on the sign. Everyone in the class was there as he scanned all the smiling faces, each saying their form of greeting, until his gaze fell upon a certain light purple-haired boy, recognizing him to be Shinso. "What are you doing here? Just because he's injured doesn't mean my training is through, and now more than ever, the world needs more heroes out there," Shinso replied. The mention of the current state of the world brought back Midoriya's plan, and seeing how everyone was around, he didn't think he could get a better opportunity. He was about to speak, but before he could, his stomach growled loudly, and he blushed in embarrassment as most of his classmates started laughing. Mina pranced up next to him and said, well, aren't you the hungry one? Don't worry, we'd had a whole buffet prepared for your return. We were all concerned about you when you left, and all you left us with was that ominous letter, especially the Ochako," concluding the last part of her sentence with a wink. Ochaka's pink cheeks turned red, and she immediately changed the subject. "Any Deku, by the sound of your stomach, I'm sure you are very hungry. Come on, everyone, now that Deku's here, we can finally start to eat." With almost a quick pace, Akako left the room. There were a few snickers in the audience before they all decided to follow her and go into the dining room. All Might have stopped Midoriya before following his classmates and telling the boy that he needed to go speak with the principal about their next steps. Midoriya nodded, and he left out back through the door as Deku went to follow his classmates. Nothing much has changed about it since he left. There was an array of food presented on the table, which each student began to grab a plate and eat. What the atmosphere was nice and refreshing for Midoriya given his recent stressful activities. Kiminari decided to break the air with a question for Midoriya. "So you were hanging around the heroes, what was your experience like?" Minta chimed in. Yeah. Did you meet any hot babes while you were running around rescuing people?" All eyes were on Midoriya now as he pondered what he should say, and how much he should say about his journey. Eventually, he spoke. It was not too much trouble. Most of the time problems were with low-tier villains or simple misunderstandings between civilians. One of the biggest challenges was when one of the leagues of villains, Muscular, was on a rampage. I had fought him before during our summer camp trip long ago, but this time I was able to beat him much easier with some help from Shindo from our hero license exam. This is a testament to how much I have improved since then. As he said that, Midoriya looked to his hand and balled it into a fist in hindsight of their first battle. Shoji was the first to reply. "So that was the reason your arms were so badly injured back then?" Midoriya nodded in confirmation. Shoji replied with, "I see. Good to know at least one of the League of Villains is back behind bars." The mention of the League brought the mood a bit down, but Midoriya quickly moved on and asked, "What about you guys? What have you been up to since I've been gone?" Kirishima was the first to speak by sucking his teeth and punching his two fists together. Well, it's alright, unless you're out with Shinso. With his quirk, the fighting always ends as soon as the enemy utters a few words. Kiminari chimed in. "Yeah, I barely get a chance to show off my skills," Sue interjected, stating, I think that's for the best. One time you tried showing your skills, and you were captured by some villains while incapacitated by your quirk, Ribbit. This got a laugh from most of the group. Once the laughter began to die down, Momo began next. That reminds me of one time that Mineta accidentally attached himself to a female villain that was escaping. Mineta quickly interjected, "Hey, if it wasn't for me, who knows where that villain was going to run off to? She could cloak herself, and I just made the best choice in the situation." Another chorus of laughter came from his classmates, and Deku laughed as well. The feeling was almost foreign to him at this point, but it was enjoyable. He looked around at all his smiling classmates as they told their share of stories in this crazy world. He started to think of how he wanted to protect these moments. He wanted to protect everyone's smile. The sudden sour look on Midoriya's face didn't go unnoticed. Uraraka was the first to comment, asking, "Why are you so down all of a sudden?" Midoriya, snapping out of his thoughts, asked his classmates one question. "Have any of you fought a villain that has had multiple quirks?" The laughter quickly died out with the question asked. Surprisingly, Bakugou was the one who answered, "No, we haven't. Are you saying there's more like you in half over there?" He pointed at Todoroki, who looked equally intrigued by Midoriya's question. Midoriya simply shook his head and said, "No, not like Todoroki or me. These individuals were given their other quirks by none other than Oneforall." The atmosphere immediately dropped from the name of that one man. Kiminari responded worriedly, Hey, I thought he could only take quirks. Now you're telling me he can give them to someone else as well." Midoriya simply nodded his head in confirmation. "The fact that you guys haven't run into someone like that means that my plan was working." Bakugou, who has been strangely quiet, replied, "Oh, what plan was that? To run yourself ragged and get captured?" Midoriya raised his head to look into his friend's eyes and said, "To protect you, all of you." His eyes scanned over all of his classmates. Bakugou grew angry at this. "Oh, and who said that I needed to be protected?" He got up and started to approach Midoriya, saying, "It sounds like you think you surpassed me and you're looking down on me." Midoriya stood up, trying to reason, "You don't. No, you don't get it. You may have his power, but you're not almighty. I don't know if you just weren't listening or unconscious, but just as the Beast Genos said during the war, we all played a part in the victory a couple of months ago. If even one of us were missing or hesitant, we would have lost that battle." He grabbed Midoriya by the shirt. "So stop trying to do everything yourself." He held his stare for a moment before Kirishima came up and put a hand on Bakugou's shoulder, signaling to calm down. Bakugou brushed off Kirishima's hand, let go of Midoriya, and began to walk off around the corner, passing Aizawa. Aizawa rounded the corner, commenting, "It's getting late, time to go to bed. I want everyone to be ready for morning patrol, Midoriya. As further punishment, you'll be on cleanup duty for the foreseeable future, and those signed up to watch over him for tomorrow will help out as well. Everyone else gets to sleep." As most of his classmates filed out of the room, eventually only he, Uraraka, and Ida were left. Ida was the first to say, "All right, I think it's best if we hurry and finish up as quickly as possible. Being well rested will fully prepare us for the challenges ahead." Midoriya and Uraraka both nodded and set out to clean. Midoriya couldn't leave his thoughts as he cleaned. "I'm sorry for dragging you guys down with me," Ida replied first. "No problem at all, Midoriya, we're your friends, and we all have to help each other." "Yeah, this is nothing to be sorry for, we're just happy that you're back," Uraraka added. A knot was tied in Midoriya's throat from that sentence. "About that, I was wondering if you guys would help me convince the others to let me leave again." Both of his low classmates turned to look at him. "Why would you want to leave? You just got back, and from what we saw when they first brought you here, you were hurt." Uraraka almost immediately replied, looking down towards the ground, remembering Deku's condition when he arrived. "Because, like I said in the letter before I left, to protect you, all the more you're around me, the greater chance you have to get caught up in All for One's plans to capture me. So you expect us to just abandon you?" Ida spoke. Midoriya shook his head. "You're not abandoning me, quite the opposite. The risk to your safety is too high for me. Think of your brother. Would he want you to recklessly risk your life if it can be avoided?" Hilda took a deep breath before responding. "You're right, my brother would probably say I was reckless, but he would be proud of me. He wouldn't abandon a friend in need, and neither will I. Whatever comes next, we will handle it together." Midoriya nodded and turned his head towards Uraraka. "What about you? You told me that you originally became a hero to help support your family. The danger of being around me and the people that are coming after me is extremely dangerous and could end that dream one way or another." Uraraka understood what he meant by his last statement and raised her head with pure conviction, with a spark in her eyes, and met Midoriya's. "I'm with Ida. I'm not going to abandon you while you're in need, Deku. I was there when that monster rampaged through the city and saw the morale of heroes sink to the floor in the wake of his destruction. While I originally wanted to just help my parents, now I want to save people, and I want to save you, Midoriya, just like you saved me in the entrance exam. Midoriya nodded his head. Well, I see. I can't change your minds. Then forget about it. Uraraka decided to try and add some humor to lighten the situation. Besides, given all the destruction caused by the villains a few months ago, my parents are doing well trying to rebuild. They contribute in their way to help rebuild society, and I want to play my part too. It didn't have the complete desired effect, but it allowed them to move past the awkward exchange and finish cleaning. They all said goodnight to each other once done and went to their respective rooms for a good night's rest. The patrol of the following day was pretty tame. Nothing out of the ordinary happened, taking care of prisoners that had escaped or settling disputes between civilians. With Midoriya, the efficacy of the patrol had skyrocketed, and he was able to find dangerous situations like they were sixth senses and unbeknownst to his classmates, they were using his dangerous sense. Midoriya was able to find and rescue civilians to help stop rampaging villains, and he did so with unbridled speed. For Midoriya, being able to do hero duties with his friends was a successful experience, something he always imagined when he first started UA High. However, he always made sure to keep one eye open to his surroundings, just in case All for One assassins were to appear. While he couldn't convince Uraraka or Ida of his plan, he was hoping that the rest of his classmates would be more forthcoming. The morning patrol went by rather quickly, as did the rest of the day. The next day, Midoriya's chaperones were Kirishima and Mina. Just like he did before, he wanted to wait until just the three of them were around so he could talk to them separately about his plan for leaving. Midoriya did not have much luck here either. Both Mina and Kirishima complained about helping Midoriya. Mina shared her story of freezing up when the time counted on dosing Gigantomachia, and was relieved when Kirishima had gone to save her and successfully delivered Anastasia. She even mentioned how that wasn't the first time that they had met the giant. Back in middle school, they had a run-in with him, and the complete opposite happened. Kirishima was the one to freeze up, and she saved the day. Kirishima didn't care to elaborate further, only saying that he doesn't like to talk about his middle school life, to which Midoriya could relate. We all want to be better than we were before, and judging by Kirishima's body language, he wanted to leave that in the past and be better for the present and future. Mina teased Kirishima about it, stating that she knows how he feels now and that maybe she needs to transface like he did. He disagreed, as she still helped him during that situation. He explained how Toga managed to destroy his dose, but using the one he got from her, he still managed to succeed. Both of his classmates grew from that experience and wanted to be better heroes because they weren't going to leave Midoriya on their own to fight. They'd be right beside him along the way. The next day, Midoriya found that his two lookouts were Gyro and Momo. Unlike the previous days of patrols around the city, today we were tasked with escorting the new Hero Public Safety Commission chairman to a new location. At first, the job seemed simple, but the large caravan of vehicles caught unwanted attention from a villainous group called Excalibur. The convoy was headed right into an ambush that was thankfully avoided with the use of a gyro quirk earphone jack. Instead of being inside the convoy, she would be carried by Midoriya along the rooftops, closely tailing along and searching for targets whenever the convoy stopped. During one intersection, she heard a group of individuals about to launch an attack on the convoy. Relaying the information to Momo within the convoy, Deku sprinted off to attack the large group before the trap could be sprung. The maneuver worked effectively. Midoriya managed to catch the group by surprise and defeat some in his initial attack. Others ran for the convoy in an attempt to capture a hostage to bargain with. Momo emerged from the vehicle to engage with the villains approaching. She had conjured up a staff and shield and fought the villains in close quarters combat. Most villains had mutant quirks that resembled blades and knives. The battle was short, with Gyro on the rooftop effectively immune to harm. She could lay down, covering fire with her sound waves, and helped Momo from being overwhelmed. Eventually, the group was successfully neutralized and captured. They were questioned on how they knew of the contents of the convoy or how the information had been leaked, but they claimed the attack was mostly for street credit. They also explained how a lot of people started forming groups for protection and power. The story left a bitter taste in the heroes' mouths as they watched their society slowly crumble day by day. Midoriya, feeling even more driven to leave now from the tale, decided that on the way back to UA, it would be the best time to talk to the girls about his plan. Unfortunately, just like the classmates before them, they disagreed with his plan. Momo remained steadfast in her decision through Midoriya persuasion. She had remarked that the last words she heard from Midnight were to trust in her judgment, and that's what she's going to do now. She couldn't stand the thought of seeing another loved one die. Jiro's reasoning was more sentimental. She spoke about how Midoriya had helped her during the music festival, and how his actions and passion influenced her to work harder. Midoriya was conflicted about the answers, as he was always proud that his friends wanted to help him, but he didn't want to subject them to danger if he didn't have to. The rest of the day went by with Midoriya contemplating his thoughts. The next day's patrol was with Kiminari and Maita. The patrol itself was fairly normal. Occasionally, Kumari would help out passing pedestrians with their cars, giving them a jump start with his quirk. Or Maita would try and impress ladies on the street passing by. The most exciting part of the day was when their group ran into the three Sturmundrang brothers, who were terrorizing people on the streets and stealing their undergarments. At first, seeing the heroes, they immediately tried to run away but were captured fairly easily by the group, caging them in and trapping them in place with a minute's quirk. Maita was the first to talk to them about their methods and how they're going about things the wrong way. He sympathized with their plight, but he also talked about how stealing pants devalued them, but being rewarded for them is the greatest feeling one man can get. He also felt revulsion on how they also took men's briefs as well. Ultimately, they were taken to jail. After all the undergarments were successfully given back to their owners, the group went on their way before being radioed by Aizawa towards a middle school building that was losing power, requesting that Kiminari provide power until their power line could be fixed. The three students went, and there they stayed, seeing no better moment. Midoriya tried to convince him to let him go. The answer was inevitable at this point. Both of his classmates disagreed. Kiminari stated that he's gotten over being scared of what comes next ever since he headed the charge on the Liberation base with the other pro-heroes. Maita says the only reason he's still a hero is because of Midoriya. Even when he was scared or unsure of himself, he would press on and find out how to win. And that really inspired him to do better and push past the fear holding him back. He wasn't here just to be seen as cool or popular anymore. He wanted to be a true hero. Midoriya didn't try to convince them otherwise. Both seemed pretty sure of their choice, and he praised them for their courage. The power line was eventually fixed, and the group left without thanks from the staff and students of that school. They left back towards UA, curious about what the next day had in store. The next day, Midoriya went on patrol with Ajero and Shoji, two of his classmates that he had never really interacted with before. Most of the patrol was pretty ordinary, either doing menial tasks such as finding lost animals, which Shoji Quirk helped with his numerous duplicated eyes and ears. Fighting was minimal for the most part of the patrol until later in the evening, when the group stumbled upon strangely large sounds of cheering and screams. After hearing the sounds, the group decided to investigate what they found, which mostly shocked them. There was a large group of people surrounding two individuals fighting each other. One had a mutant-type quirk that resembled a minotaur, versus another with a transformation-style quirk that covered his skin in layers of rock. The two combatants went head-to-head in an exchange of blows while the crowd cheered them on. The group contemplated what to do about this. The heroes and the police are spread very thin, and these people are only in violation of minor laws, but they could seriously hurt each other or, at worst, kill someone. They decided they wanted to put an end to it, but judging from the crowd, there could have been anywhere from 20 to 30 people. This was not something they could deal with by themselves. Calling in the rest of the class could probably provide enough muscle to overwhelm all of them. But Midoriya wanted to solve this with as little violence as possible. Instead, the group decided to infiltrate the crowd and find the ringleader. Eventually they found him, and they tried to talk him into disbanding the event. After some talking, they came to a compromise with the young heroes. If they could beat the three top fighters, they would disband with no trouble. Midoriya was the first one up. His opponent was muscular lean, with tattoos going down both his left and right sides and a scar running across his face from the bottom of his right eye to his upper lip. He held a katana on his hip, but other than that, he held no other visible weapons. The two squared off in the ring, and Midoriya waited for him to make the first move. When he noticed that his eyes started bleeding, he also noticed that his eyes were a different shape than normal, and a complex circular symbol remained where his pupils were. Midoriya didn't feel affected by anything, so he wanted to strike before whatever quirk he had taken effect. But when he was about to move, the other user decided to forfeit the match. As Midoriya got back to the others and saw the puzzled look on the young heroes' faces, he explained that fighter's quirk name is Perception. It allows for him to look into the future for up to 10 seconds and see the results of any action taken against that target within his sight. And he must not have seen any action he could take that would lead to victory, and that Midoriya must be a frightening hero. Next up was Shoji. His opponent wore a typical boxer-type outfit, with his only weapons being a pair of knuckle dusters, while also having metal coverings over his elbows and knees. He also had what seemed like energy supplements in his hand, which he digested before the match had begun. As the fight began, Shoji utilized his famous Octo Blows special attack to quickly overwhelm his opponent to his surprise. However, most of his punches were blocked or redirected. The fighter counterbacked with a vicious blow of his own, utilizing his metal-covered elbow into Shoji's midsection. The blow doubled him over, but he regained his balance before the following kick could land against the young hero's chin. Restabilize and watch the fighter more closely. Ajiro noticed the stance the fighter was in was a Muay Thai stance, which is known as the art of 8 limbs. Compared to someone with 8 actual limbs, he'd wondered how this fight would go. Shoji started again with an octopus, trying to find an opening in the fighter's defenses. He got some lucky grazes in, but nothing concrete. The fighter wasn't content to be a punching bag either. He would launch his own punches, elbows, and occasional knees to try and keep Shoji off guard. Using his numerous arms, Shoji would block or counter the attacks, but due to the fighter's gear, any direct clash would leave Shoji more damaged. To end the fight quickly, Shoji attempted to grab each of his opponent's limbs, which would leave him defenseless. These attempts failed, but given his opponent's impressive speed, that seemed to have increased more than what it was before. The even exchange of blows became a one-sided slaughter. Shoji was on the defensive, attempting to shield his body's major organs with his dupliarms. He noticed that his opponent's breathing was very ragged. He started to slow down, and Shoji took the opportunity to strike back, but it was a feint the fighter used to lower his defenses. He sped up again and was able to land a solid punch against the hero's jaw, followed by an elbow strike to the chest, ending with a knee into a push kick. Shoji's head was spinning, but the speed of the blows was definitely slower than before, dampening their power. After getting to his feet, he strikes out again with an octoblow while the fighter tries his best to defend. His blocks and deflects were too slow to stop all of them this time, and eventually he decided to swap offense over defense with the exchange. There, the two fighters exchanged blow after blow until, finally, both fighters dropped to the ground exhausted. The match was called a draw, and both were carried out of the ring and healed from their injuries. Ajiro was last, and his opponent was the Minotaur that they first saw when they got there. He didn't have a weapon like the others, but given the horns on his head, it was best to avoid them if at all possible. He wore nothing but green shorts, showing off his scarred chest. The fight began with the Minotaur charging at Waro's horns first, which Waro dodged using his tail as a spring to get out of the way. He tried to strike the bull in the back of the head with his tail as he jumped over, but the Minotaur was able to counter with his horn. The Minotaur threw multiple punches at Waro, but most of them were redirected or dogged. Waro would use his opponent's wide attacks against him, using his tail to counterattack while his enemy was off balance. He became predictable after a while, though, as the Minotaur was able to grab a hold of his tail during one of his counters and slammed Ajiro into the ground. Ajiro was unable to break the hold and was flung and slammed around the ring by his tail before being thrown into the air. The Minotaur jumped into the air, ready to pierce Orijo on his horns, and Midoriya was on the very edge of interfering right then and there. That is, before noticing Waro spinning in midair, he came down hard in between the Minotaur horns directly on his head with a tail swipe, which launched the Minotaur back down, not finishing there. However, he finished the Minotaur off with a swamp tailspin smack to the back of the neck, which killed the man. The crowd was wild and, after some time, departed like they promised they would. The fighter approached Shoji about his fighting style, and why he doesn't attempt to use something to bolster his attacks. Shoji showed that his quirk was multi-purpose in that he could summon other parts of the body on his limbs rather than just hands, which he saw as a problem in his logic. He also said that Shoji should work on his attack pattern given his extended reach. He could attack from unorthodox angles and doesn't need to rely on a straightforward method, which Shoji agreed to look into. The two shook hands, and the fighter left. When asking the ringleader the purpose of these matches, he described numerous reasons, such as vendettas, settling gang disputes, entertainment, or for some distraction from what's happening around them. An interesting story that Midoriya pondered while resting with his classmates while they were recovering from their injuries. He decided to bring up his idea with them, and to no surprise, they both disagreed with it. Ajiro related to Deku wanting to become a hero even when it seemed like his quirk did so much damage to his body that it was practically useless. Like how his tail was seen as mostly useless, he wanted to prove to be useful to everyone despite how ordinary his quirk was. Shoji simply said that danger comes with being a hero, If you're not willing to risk your own life to save others, especially your friend's life, then you don't deserve the title, and doubting someone's drive to help is disrespectful to all their efforts to be a hero. Midoriya apologized and understood Shoji a little better now, and maybe he was right. Maybe they could all see this through together, he thought as they headed back to UA, unaware of the tragedy that would happen the very next day. The fifth day started out fairly normally. Midoriya's companions this time around were Kota and Toru, which was a composition that lacked real fighting power in his mind, so he had hoped there would be very little to no action, and for the most part he was right. The day was quiet with his Anivoice quirk. Any animal-related problems were practically non-existent, but something suspicious happened when, over the radio, a sudden screeching sound echoed across the channel. After checking for all other teams on the line, all checked in, besides one, it was the Kirishima, Kiminari, and Minta groups. Panic started to immediately set in for Midoriya about what happened to them. Kota immediately used his voice to call to the birds and have them scout the area where the group once was. The birds spotted them, and once the location was known, Midoriya immediately dashed off, going as fast as he could towards the area while leaving the other two behind. The two relayed the information to the others and followed after Deku. Meanwhile, Minta had just used his quirk as a spring to avoid another blast of energy, throwing purple orbs at the weirdo that just appeared to be trying to kill them. He, Kirishima, and Kiminari had been on standard patrol, watching out for something strange, when they came upon somebody who was slumped across a building. He wore blue jeans with an open Hawaiian button-up shirt that revealed his bluish skin. He seemed to be in distress, so Kirishima rushed to see if anything was wrong. Holding the person up, he only repeated the words "I needed" over and over again while the others attempted to fill in the missing words. But what he said shocked the group. "I need his despair." With that, he opened his mouth, revealing rows of sharp teeth attempting to bite Kirishima. Kirishima immediately hardened to protect himself and threw a jab into the person's stomach. He connected, but he felt a punch to his stomach as well. He hunched over in pain from the unsuspecting blow, and once he looked up, he saw a bright light aiming straight for him. He felt himself being pushed back into the corner of a building. The blast took their communications offline, but their classmates surely would figure out something was wrong and come investigate. They just needed to hold out until then. Midoriya rushed as fast as he could until he could hear the sounds of fighting. He arrived at a scene of Kirishima taking a barrage of energy attacks that would chip at his hardened skin, while Minta and Kiminari would attempt to dodge others aimed at them. Midoriya took the opportunity to try to knock the villain out with a kick to the back of the head. Spotting Midoriya and seeing his attention, Kirishima immediately tried to shout for him to stop, but it was too late. Midoriya kicked and landed. He instantly felt a hard sensation in the back of his head and landed next to Kirishima, disoriented from the pain. Kirishima said that physical attacks don't work against him. Every hit that lands is reflected onto us. As he finished his sentence, he was blasted into the ground by more light waves. Midoriya turned his face towards the villain just in time to avoid 3 light beams. The villain had what appeared to be 4 small sun-like objects above his head. 2 were shooting beams at Minta and Kiminari, while the other 2 focused on Kirishima and himself. He avoided another burst of beams and attempted to counter with air force. Multiple compress air shots rang out, aiming for center mass. The villain jumped out of the way and shot more light beams at Midoriya, who avoided them or batted them away with his black whip. His danger sense flared, and he looked towards Kiminari, who was running out of space to dodge. He yelled to Kirishima to go and help Kiminari, to which he agreed and struggled to run over to help. Midoriya and the villain were trading projectiles, dodging, and repositioning to fire again. Minta bounded next to Midoriya, telling him to drive the villain into an enclosed area surrounded by his pop-off balls. Midoriya agreed and began trying to force the villain into the designated area, while Kiminari and Kirishima were both safe from the light beams as all of the villain's attention was directed towards Midoriya. They moved to the designated area to spring the trap. Midoriya managed to move him to the area. Both Midoriya and Minta both attacked the villain with long-range attacks to keep his focus on them while dodging out of the way of his attacks. Minta had let Midoriya know of usable gaps in his pop-off grid that he could use to maneuver. The villain, on the other hand, didn't have such information, and his left foot was eventually stuck in place, to which he used his light beams to cut. But that moment's distraction was enough for Midoriya to land a couple of air cannons directly into the villain's chest, causing him to fall back onto the wall of another building, getting his left hand stuck. Mizuki used his black whip to pin his other hand, whereas Minta signaled the other 2, Kirishima and Kiminari, to both jump down from the top of the building. The villain wasn't completely unaware, however, as he shot multiple light beams up above himself. Kiminari thought quickly and used Kirishima as a shield against the barrage. However, two seemed to curve around Kirishima and were headed straight for Kiminari's chest and head. In utter shock, he closed his eyes, waiting for the impact, but only a slice on his right cheek and a stinging sensation on his right arm were felt. He opened his eyes to see, and despite the pain, he delivered an indiscriminate shock of 3 million bolts once close enough, hopefully frying the villain unconscious. Kirishima had struggled to get up and run to give Maito a high five. Midoriya sat and stared at the seemingly lifeless body, but cracks began to form in his skin. He immediately started to yell at everyone to get back. He's going to explode. Kiminari was too close to escape the radius, so he shrouded him in a black whip and yanked him as hard as he could away. Meanwhile, Kirishima used his unbreakable form and covered Maita. The explosion absorbed all 4 students and completely destroyed the building the villain was attached to. Koda and Toru, who were on the outer edges of the blast, rushed to see if their friends were okay. Midoriya was the first to emerge from the smoke rattle, miraculously not very harmed. His concern, however, was first on Kiminari, whom he unraveled from his black whip to find unconscious but still breathing. He looked over to Kirishima and Maita. Maita was crying cheers of thanks to Kirishima for saving him, but Kirishima only managed a weak acceptance before falling unconscious himself, noticing his back was burned and bleeding from the explosion, and the ruble pelting his vulnerable skin. He and Kiminari needed medical attention for their injuries, and Midoriya was determined to get them there as fast as possible. He looked to Toru and Koda and told them to release the suppressants. They looked hesitant to comply at first, but reminding them of their friend's injuries spurred them to action. Toru pulled out the small device from her gloves and pressed the red button in the center. The restraints dropped to the ground, and Midoriya could already feel his power rising with his emotions. He grabbed both Kiminari and Kirishima, thanked his companions for their understanding, and told them that he was taking them to the central hospital. With that said, he just seemed to have vanished from all 3 of their eyes, along with the 2 wounded students. Just then, the other group started pouring in, looking at the damaged surroundings and the lack of members in their party. They had a lot to explain. Midoriya was able to get his friends to the hospital rather quickly at 100% speed. He was able to get them there and check them in without too many problems. He was told that none of his friends' wounds were fatal, but Kirishima had a very mild poison going through his system that messed with his body movements that should clear up in some days, along with injuries to his back from the explosion. He should be back to normal within the week. Kiminari had mostly superficial damage done. His right arm was pierced, but he should make a full recovery within 3 days. He was determined to wait there until his friends had woken up. Even when the rest of his classmates came and were filled in on the situation, he wanted to stay there because it was his fault. If he wasn't there, none of this would have happened and nobody would have gotten hurt. He needed to make them see how dangerous this is. Midoriya sat in the waiting room along with Toriai and Koda. The atmosphere was tense. Toru tried to lift their spirits by saying everything would be fine, but Midoriya only replied, "Nothing will be fine as long as I'm here." Both Koda and Toru were puzzled by this. Toru asked Deku to explain what he meant by that, and Midoriya simply replied, "I'm the reason they're hurt. That villain was after me. He was a one-for-one assassin." Toru tried to reason, "It's not your fault, Deku, and we came out on top. Today, we came out relatively fine, but who knows if we can say the same for tomorrow or the next day. I don't want to see my friends get hurt anymore, especially because of me." Midoriya cut her off. "I need to leave to keep you guys safe." Remembering what Shoji said, he continued, "It's not that I don't think you were capable of being heroes before. I'm sure both of you would be great. Toru, your being invisible would make you great to work with police and detectives alike. Koda, you would be great for lost pets and search and rescue missions. But it's a new time, and being with me almost guarantees combat. Koda, could you honestly send animals to their deaths if the situation called for it?" Koda simply shook his head. "Toru, you may be physically invisible, but what about if a villain can still find you? What then?" "But I was able to help out earlier." She said she was downtrodden. "Yes, that was because the villain's quirk was complementary to yours. If he was using anything else but light, he let the rest go unsaid. Look, I respect both you and all my classmates as true heroes, but I don't want to put you guys in situations you aren't prepared to handle. I need to be separated from you guys for my and your own safety." Both Koda and Toru couldn't refute his argument that he was right, and they reluctantly agreed to his idea. Midoriya was exhausted by the day's events and fell asleep in the waiting room. Midoriya woke up to Shiro and Asui bringing him breakfast. He thanked them, and after eating, they told the staff that Kiminari was awake. Midoriya leapt at the chance to see him again, and his condition was that his right arm was bandaged and he had a small bandage on his left cheek. He asked about what had happened with the villain, and Midoriya explained the scenario to him. After reconciling, the group decided to let him rest and recover. Before leaving, Midoriya told Kiminari that he should really thank Toru as soon as he's able, as she was the one that redirected the villain's beams away from him. He nodded and gave a thumbs up of approval. Midoriya, Shiro, and Ask both went on patrols, but Midoriya was hesitant to leave too far away from the hospital just in case someone were to target his friends again. On the other hand, he wanted to stay far away enough that if someone came after him, the fight wouldn't involve the hospital in any way. However, the day went by incredibly smoothly. Nothing of importance actually happened, no fighting, no villains, and not many problems at all. Having nothing better to do, Midoriya tried to tell Shiro and Asui about his idea, and tried to make them understand the danger of him being around them. His classmates didn't agree. They wanted to help Midoriya with his problems, and together they could beat any villain just like they did on Paradise Island. Midoriya wanted to argue more, but the group got distracted by being contacted by Aizawa, who told them that Kirishima had awakened from his slumber. Midoriya and the rest of the group began to head in the direction of the hospital. By the time they arrived, other classmates were already filling him in on current events. Midoriya waited till he was the last in the room before he apologized for being the cause of his being hurt. He should have warned them sooner of the danger, but Kirishima stopped him. He accepted what happened and was just happy to be able to help Midoriya in his fight. A hero needs to be able to get up again and again no matter the obstacle, and win. Which they did. He told Midoriya that he would be fine and that this doesn't change his choice to help him. He's with him till the end. Midoriya smiled at Kirishima's words and fist bumped before Midoriya, and his group returned to UA, prepared for the next day. The next day, Midoriya's companions were Sato and Aoyama. Patrol with the crew was fairly normal. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. Before heading back to UA, Midoriya wanted to go over his idea with the pair. Sato disagreed immediately. He wanted to help Midoriya and bring his class back together. He enjoyed everyone being together, smiling and laughing. With Midoriya gone, everyone was worried about him, and the mood just didn't feel right with him gone. Aoyama was conflicted. He saw the point Midoriya was trying to make about the danger surrounding him, but he didn't want to leave his friend to face that danger by himself. He ultimately didn't give a definitive answer for or against Midoriya's idea, but he would consider it more when he could handle his quirk better than Deku could. The group went to visit Kirishima and Kiminari in the hospital to realize that both were cleared to check out and rest back at home. Kiminari's right arm was in a cast, while Kirishima's back was still wrapped in bandages under his clothes. Both weren't cleared to go back to hero duty, which kind of bummed them out a bit, but the doctors conversed with the recovery girl to help with their recovery. Having multiple sessions with her should speed up their healing to the point where they will be back to normal within 3 days. The news got the group excited, and they couldn't wait to tell everyone else back at UA about the news. Once they returned, they found a surprise party waiting for them. Kirishima and Kiminari parents were already aware of when their sons would be dispatched from the hospital and made arrangements with the other parents to stage the celebration. It was a peaceful day, but Midoriya wondered how long this peace would last in such a chaotic city. The next day, Midoriya had a patrol with Tokoyami and Shinso. Given that Shinso had not been granted his hero license, Aizawa was required to be with him to be able to use his quirk in public as a form of work study. It also benefited Aizawa in being able to give Shinso real-life experience through the use of his binding cloth. Kirishima had been right about being on patrol with Shinso combined with Aizawa. Both had two extremely powerful supportive quirk abilities that rendered most combat scenarios completely one-sided. Some fights would end before they even began. Tokoyami and Midoriya had plenty of downtime to themselves as Shinso and Aizawa would practice their techniques. They discussed Midoriya's idea, and he had an opinion similar to his other classmates. Midoriya's mental list of partners he's had over the past few days left only Bakugou, and Todoroki is the last two people he hasn't talked to about his idea, and he had no illusions of even trying to attempt to convince them, as that would lead absolutely nowhere. He needed to change tactics. Most of his classmates still wanted him to stay, and simply talking to them about the danger wasn't cutting it. Maybe he could show them the difference. Midoriya then came up with a plan of action, but it would require Aizawa's help to achieve it. So when the patrol was done, he asked to see his teacher in private, to which Aizawa agreed. The plan was for Midoriya to challenge his class to a match similar to the sports festival, and if he won, they would let him leave, and if he miraculously lost, he would be fully committed to staying. Midoriya explained that if they were able to beat him, then they are fully capable of fighting the people that would be sent after him, and if not, then he doesn't want them to get injured for his sake. Aizawa pondered for a moment before ultimately agreeing with Midoriya's plan and saying that it would happen in 2 days. Midoriya was slightly surprised to see him agree to his terms, but was thinking that maybe he could rationalize Midoriya's motive. It would only be rational to not expose his students to extreme danger if it's possible to avoid it. The rest of the day was relaxing for Midoriya. He had his objective in his sights, and he just needed to be patient for 2 more days to achieve it. The day started pretty normally, and the patrol for the day went pretty much the same. Of course, being with Bakugou meant a lot more yelling than the previous days and reining him in on pedestrians that inconvenienced them. Midoriya, however, was a bit worried about the disparity in their party. It was the top 3 students in the class, at least in terms of combat. He had no doubts that the others could hold their own in most situations, but he was fearful of another assassin's attack, one that might not be as easily detected as the previous one was. Bakugou must have caught on to Midoriya's unease and confronted him about it during their break. "You don't have to worry about them, you know." Looking at Midoriya's mildly confused face, he continued, "The extras, our classmates, can take care of themselves. Even if they couldn't, they would find some way to get the word out. You don't need to worry about it, so stay focused. Also, forget about that bull about you leaving. You're not protecting anyone by doing that. You're simply delaying the inevitable. Those assassins you have to fight will still be out there rampaging, and as heroes, it is our duty to stop them." I agree with Bakugou. Even if they can't capture you conventionally, it will only be a matter of time before they go for alternative methods, such as attacking your friends and family, to make you surrender that way. So they would be attacked under any circumstance. Intervened Todoroki. "I didn't ask for your input half and half," Bakugou shouted in reply. While the following conversation between the Todoroki and Bakugou occurred, Midoriya was within his thoughts on what they said. They could be right. Villains will be around either way, and sooner or later, All for One will come for his friends or family just to get to him. Family. The word rolled around in his brain as he thought about his mother in danger or captured. He couldn't stand the thought. He then thought about Nana and her son Shigaraki. He still wanted to save him, as no doubt he was suffering under all circumstances. But maybe he was wrong. Maybe the atrocities that he committed overruled his will to save him. Midoriya originally didn't think he could discuss this topic with anyone, but hearing Todoroki talk about family made him realize that he too may be going through something similar with his brother Toya. He just tuned back into the conversation as Bakugou was addressing him. "And you," he pointed at Deku, "don't forget the score is 3-1 now, you're still below me. Don't think that just because you got some new powers, you're ahead of me now." Midoriya would have liked to point out that he was injured the last time and technically held back during their second fight, but that wouldn't really help the conversation. Instead, he turned to Todoroki and began to ask him a question, which ticked Bakugou off that Midoriya ignored him. But before he spoke out about it, he heard Midoriya's question. "Todoroki, what are your plans for dealing with your brother?" The spontaneous question shocked Todoroki for a moment before replying, "My plan? What do you mean? Do you think that he can still be saved, despite the horrible things he may have done?" Todoroki sat and thought. He never thought about what he would do when he caught him. Could he kill his own brother if it came to that? Is he too far gone? He can't exactly fault his brother completely, as he was just like him before he met Midoriya. Todoroki answered, "I don't know, he must be stopped one way or another." Why the sudden interest? Midoriya was trying to rack his brain for an excuse, as going over trying to save Shigaraki would not at all go over well with Bakugou here. But before he could reply, his danger sense flared, and he leapt at Todoroki, immediately moving him out of harm's way of a stray metal object that embedded itself into the ground. More objects seemed to shoot out from the distance, causing the group as a whole to doge around the communal area where they were taking their break, the metal objects ripping into the benches and tables. Midoriya, thinking fast, used the 6th user quirk smokescreen to cloud their movement. The group used the smokescreen to get behind some buildings opposite the initial angle of the attacker. The group discussed amongst themselves if anyone saw who or where the enemy was located when a guttural scream was heard. "Show, come out here and die so I can finally have my wish come true. I was told you are the key to finally having Endeavor kill me." With that statement alone, they knew who was responsible for the attack, ending the villain that attacked the Todoroki family during their winter study. But something fell off Midoriya. This idiot again, when will he just take the hint? Bakugou said he started to emerge from behind the building to immediately duck back behind it when another metal object slammed near and fragmented some of the cover behind him. "The idiots on the rooftops are about 300 meters away." Bakugou told them. Midoriya looked at the object that crashed into the side of the building. It didn't appear to be anything but a lump of metal, but in the shape of a rock. Bakugou immediately started to give orders. He would use a grenade canister and cause a distraction with the explosion, during which Midoriya and Todoroki would lift up above onto the rooftops, while Bakugou would attack him head-on, hoping to divide his attention. Bakugou counted to 3, then threw his canister towards the end, which, once struck by the metal projectile, almost immediately exploded. That was the cue for the trio to move. Todoroki created an ice pillar, and along with Midoriya, they rose to the top of the building they were hiding behind while Bakugou blasted forward. Once the smoke cleared, he threw more metal objects at Midoriya and Todoroki. Midoriya countered by using his air cannons to ricochet or stop the movement of the objects, allowing him to progress further, while Todoroki would create walls of ice blocking the objects as he continued forward. Todoroki attacked with his flame, launching a grandiose amount at the end, to which the villain put his bandages together and made a heat shield to guard himself. Todoroki was momentarily stunned, thinking about how his mere bandages blocked his flames. The distraction worked. Bakugou was now in close proximity to ending, about to be struck with an explosion. However, with a glint from the sun reflecting off the edge of the villian bandages, he nearly avoided an attack that left a small cut on his cheek and used his explosion to deflect another bandage headed right at his neck. He flew higher in order to stay out of the villain's range and rained down with an AP shot barrage. He was shocked when the stone ground beneath the villain started to shape and morph upwards, forming a half-dome around him that immediately turned into a grayish metal material that absorbed or deflected Bakugou's attacks. Midoriya and Todoroki were both approaching from the open side of the dome when suddenly the roof of the building they were running on collapsed. Todoroki fell down and stabilized himself with his flames before hitting the floor, while Midoriya used his black whip to cling to the edges of the rooftop. Once checking that Todoroki was fine, he launched himself upwards. He used his float and black whip to close the distance, using his momentum to swing across the rooftops. Bakugou was busy avoiding the blades on the ends of the bandages as he shot them out. Unexpectedly, the other 2 students recovered so fast that he was blinded by Midoriya's pinpoint focus that suddenly wrapped around him. Ending didn't give up, however, as he suddenly shook the foundations of the buildings he and Midoriya were in, forcing both to begin to fall into the rubble. Midoriya used his float ability to stay in the air, but was being weighed down when the rubble started increasing in weight as it fell. Eventually, he was forced to let go. He immediately looked at Bakugou and told him that he had to have multiple quirks. Todoroki emerged from the building with the collapsed roof and looked at the rubble to see if the ending was still alive, but paused as metal spikes were flung in his direction. He raised an ice wall to block it, but was surprised when, after the metal spikes connected, a fireball screamed through the smoke as well, crashing into the wall of ice and shattering it. Fireballs as well came flying upwards towards Midoriya and Bakugou, which they both dodged. The smoke cleared, revealing an ending with a small amount of blood running down his lip and him smiling deafeningly. The bandages on the back of his getup were burning, slowly forming more fireballs that hovered near his bandages. Midoriya deactivated his float and used his black whip to slingshot himself down towards the ending, hoping to end this quickly using a Manchester smash. The stone near the ending started to shift into a stone bridge that the ending touched, turning it into metal to defend himself. Midoriya's attack landed and nearly cracked all the way through the barrier. Bakugou followed up the attack with an AP shot that pierced all the way through, forcing him to dodge out of the way. Todoroki attacked at the position he was going to land with ice, but ended up shooting a fireball that neutralized the attack, while bandages on his arms gathered debris from the buildings, which he turned to metal and threw at Midoriya and Bakugou. Midoriya kicked the debris away, while Bakugou blew it away. Midoriya kept charging. Wanting to keep up the pressure, he sent a barrage of Air Force blasts at Ending, who countered with his bandaged blades, slashing and dispersing them before they could land a hit while using his fireballs to keep Todoroki's ice at bay. The ground infrastructure of Midoriya rises to block his path, but he simply busts through it, continuing Bakugou behind him and firing away with explosions. Using Fujian with his legs, Midoriya suddenly gains a burst of speed towards the end. He tried to summon another wall, but it was too late for Midoriya to reach him. His bandages were too slow as well, and Midoriya punched him several meters away. The villain was still able to stand on his feet, thankfully, to mitigate the damage the blow did by turning part of his clothing to metal, but he still crunched over in pain. At that moment, Todoroki let loose with another flame assault that was again blocked by a heat dome. This time, however, it began to melt away as Todoroki kept pouring it on. He raised the stone under Todoroki's feet, momentarily hindering him by flinging him up into the air. Midoriya went to catch him while Bakugou charged, ending. He had enough distance to charge up a howitzer and blast the villian point blank, the resulting explosion blasting the dome and Ending away. Ending was knocked unconscious from the attack, and he seemingly wasn't self-destructing like other pawns of All for One. But just to be safe, he was cocooned in an ice prison until authorities arrived to take him away, hopefully for good. After having discussed this with the police, the heroes continued on with their patrol unobstructed. The rest of the day was fairly normal, but that fight served as a reminder of why tomorrow's events will be even more important. The anticipation almost prevented Midoriya from sleeping, but alas, his body eventually won out over his brain, and he rested semi-peacefully for the night. The day started normally enough, and he went on patrol, anxious about what's going to take place later on. Aizawa must have given the news on the match yesterday, given the atmosphere around his classmates when he was around. Everyone was anxious and mentally preparing themselves for what was to come. As patrols came to an end, everyone had time to eat and settle down before Aizawa called all of them down to the gymnasium. All the students gathered around as Aizawa explained, "All right, you all know this, but I'll go over it again. Similar to the sports festival, the battle is won by incapacitating or removing your opponent from the bounds of the arena. You are not allowed to help in any way if you are thrown out. Other than that, anything goes. Oh, and before I forget." He pulls out the device to restrain Midoriya and presses the button, releasing him. Now, everyone that's participating heads out onto the field. A good majority of the class proceeded to head out onto the grounds, leaving only 6 individuals behind. Kirishima and Kiminari, both of whom, while almost fully recovered, refused to enter in this bout in fear of potentially reopening their wounds. He also knew that Kota and Toru agreed with Midoriya's plan and that Aoyama was conflicted. He guessed that he would be fine with either outcome of this match. He paused, and on the 6th individual, however, "You're not going to participate, Shinso." "No, there is nothing to be able to use the binding cloth on in this landscape, and he knows how my quirk works. Besides, it seems to me that judging by the looks on their faces, the time for talk is over," he said as he looked onto the field. Aizawa nodded in reply and looked back at the team's position on the field. "You may now begin." Midoriya considered his options for a moment, not wanting to hurt his friends too badly but wanting to end this as quickly as possible. He opened the fight with a St. Louis Smash Air Force at 40% full cowling, hoping the large air wave would throw all, if not most, of his class out of bounds, but to his surprise, a giant wall of ice was brought up to defend his class from the air pressure smacking into the wall and dissipating harmlessly around the class. Before he could set up his next move, a Russian doll was launched over the wall, opening up to reveal the contents inside. It was a flashbang. Midoriya covered his eyes to shield himself from the light. As he shielded his eyes, more Russian dolls came from over the wall, each carrying flashbangs to keep Midoriya stunned and unable to see. Midoriya's danger sense flared something else was coming at him. Judging by the speed, direction, and method of travel, he deduced that it had to be Ida. With that information in mind, he tried to use his danger sense to predict the angle he was going to attack from. He knew Ida's style of attack. Combing that knowledge with his danger sense allowed him to predict and catch Ida's kick before it could land to the side of his head. Midoriya took this as an opportunity and grabbed Ida's leg with his other arm while maintaining his hold. He powered down to 30%. And began to spin Ida around in a circle and throw him out of bounds before he could recover. The flashbangs had stopped just as multiple pillars of ice rose from behind the ice wall. Simultaneously, more ice and pillars advanced towards Midoriya's position. He countered with a Delaware Smash Air Force punch that completely stopped the attack before it could reach. On top of the pillars near the ice wall, however, were Mainta, Gyro, Mina, and Zero, all about to rain down fire on Midoriya from a distance. Midoriya dodged left and right as the acid, pop-off balls, and sound waves struck the ground around him. He switched tactics and used his smokescreen to confuse the long-range shooters while using his Air Force gauntlets to fire back precise air cannons at the targets on the pillar, forcing Mainta and Mina both to jump off their initial pillars and towards the next one. To Midoriya's surprise, the shooters didn't grow any less accurate. He could only assume that Momo had given them heat-seeking goggles to see him inside his smoke, but this worked to Midoriya's advantage as well. He would track the trajectory of the attacks back to the users and fire back with air cannon shots that would displace them and lighten the attacks against him. Suddenly, the smoke was dispersed by Bakugou, who used his explosions to clear all of the smoke out of the way. The first thing Midoriya noticed was that the big ice wall was gone and that the melee fighters were rapidly closing in on his position. Meanwhile, Momo, Todoroki, and Takoyami were both still in their positions. Shoji, Ajiro, and Sato all charged Midoriya. Akira was first trying to sweep Midoriya's legs with a tail swipe, but Midoriya jumped over it. While Midoriya was in midair, both Shoji and Sato attacked with a barrage of punches. Being in midair limited Midoriya's options, forcing him to block most of the punches directly. He was about to use the 7th user quirk float when suddenly Gyro's sound amplifiers appeared above him. Her heartbeat wall prevented him from going upwards and forced him to take the barrage of blows. Midoriya, while not hurt by the punches, felt his body stiffen, and his muscles started to spasm uncontrollably. It must be Tsuyu's mucus, he thought as Shoji and Sato tried to move him out of the zone. They struggled to move him back, but a third hand appeared between them, and as they tapped Midoriya's chest, he became weightless. He didn't see Uraraka in the charge towards him, but that could have been due to her maybe advancing from pillar to pillar, hiding her presence until the right time. He started to be pushed back by their combined effort, so he thought fast, and using a black whip, he dug his way into the ground to find a purchase. Once more, the struggle of pushing and pulling was a stalemate, and Ajiro added to the mix, wrapping his tail around Midoriya and trying to pull him out. Tsuyu came out of camouflage and attempted to wrap up Midoriya with her tongue. Midoriya's body was slowly going back to normal, and he immediately raised the percentage of full cowling up to 45%. He used a floppy-style black whip, which shot a black whip from out of his mouth and wrapped around Tsuyu's tongue. The shock and how the situation looked immediately caused several embarrassing stares and a blush to form on Tsuyu's face, and one of anger for another. Using everyone's moment's hesitation, Midoriya swung his head back, forcing Tsuyu to land out of bounds. Retaining his black whip from his mouth, he overpowered both Shoji and Sato and threw both of them out of bounds. A similar situation happened to Orijo. Midoriya had forcefully pried his tail from around his neck and used it to swing him out of bounds. Uraraka was stunned as Midoriya began to approach her, but before he could, a wall of ice separated them. Todoroki yelled for her to pull back as Gyro, Mina, and Minta continued their attack. Midoriya countered this time with a sharp wave of his hand that sent out a wind gust that deflected most of the projectiles sent his way or steered them widely off course. Zero attempted to grab Uraraka and Gyro and bring them towards the group while successfully grabbing Uraraka, but Midoriya managed to grab Gyro first. She had movement closer along with the melee fighters to restrict his movements, and unlike Uraraka, there was no barrier in his way to grab her. He had flung Gyro through the air into Shoji so he could catch her, making her out of bounds as well. Bakugou attacked next, using the AP autocannon, forcing Midoriya to jump upwards. Under the effects of the Uraraka quirk, his momentum skyrocketed into the air. He tried to halt his momentum using the black whip he implanted into the ground, but he felt his grip slip. Using an alternating strategy, he used a float to stop his momentum and looked down. Bakugou was aiming for the ground where his black whip was buried, combined with Mina's corrosive acid burning into the ground enough to free the black whip. Midoriya tried to dig them into the ground at other locations, but the same result would forbid him from finding a purchase. Bakugou charged upwards to attack Midoriya in midair. Midoriya dissipated his black whip, then resummoned it again using pinpoint focus. 3 whips came charging at Bakugou. He dodged all of them, coming up to land an explosive tap on Midoriya's shoulder before dodging again out of the way of another black whip that sprang from Midoriya's back at him. Midoriya was able to use finger flicks from his Air Force gauntlets to move and dodge Bakugou's next attack. His sense of danger flared again as someone else came up from behind him. He swung himself around to see Takoyami in his black fallen angel state, about to attack him with one of Dark Shadow's arms. Midoriya thought fast and used his black whip to wrap around Dark Shadow's large arm, using it as leverage to maneuver around Takoyami while dodging Dark Shadow's other arm. When he was directly above him, Midoriya initiated a foot dive directly into his back, sending him spiraling towards the ground. Midoriya refocused his attention on Bakugou, who was attempting to use his black whip to catch his old friend, but none of them managed to connect, allowing Bakugou to strike him again, this time on his left leg. This exchange went on for 3 more times before Midoriya was able to finally get a hold of Bakugou's leg and attempt to throw him out of bounds. Before he touched the ground, however, he was able to recover. After Midoriya was clear, he was immediately under fire from projectiles from the ground. Momo, Minta, and Mina were using similar guns to the gang work as henchmen in the provisional licensing exam, while Shoto, Zero, and Uraraka worked together to throw ice rocks at him. He dodged the cement gun bullets while smacking the ice away with his black whip. He would return fire with his air cannons at a much slower pace than before, being mindful of the blowback of being weightless and course-correcting accordingly. Bakugou was back on him in that moment, grabbing him while he was distracted and performing an X-catapult that threw him into Tokoyami, who struck him with a Sabbath strike that drove him to the edge of the arena. Using air force, he countered the force, stopping his momentum before he touched the ground as he came to a stop. 3 of the cement gun shots managed to hit him on his right hand, sticking it to his thighs, while the other 2 struck his feet, sticking them together. Bakugou saw his opportunity charge directly at Midoriya using his howitzer impact. Midoriya's mind was flushed into panic on the situation, searching for a plan on what to do. But his frantic state caused his power to flare as it did. He realized that this entire time he was holding back, spending the last few days unable to access the other half of his power. He subconsciously held back to 50% or less full cowling, but not anymore as Bakugou howitzer impact closed in on him. He raised his power to 60% and unleashed a Detroit smash while not hitting Bakugou directly. The air pressure alone was enough to send him flying away along with Tokoyami, Zero and Maida, who attempted to grab and hold them from flying out, but all that ended up accomplishing was him also getting caught up in the colossal wave of pressure and joining their friends along the way. All 4 of them were blasted out of the arena out of bounds, leaving only 4 other students remaining. Midoriya began to move forward, easily breaking out of the cement that held his hands and feet together. He used his black whip to dig into the ground, fending off Mina's acid as he made his way forward. Unexpectedly, Mina was suddenly hoisted into the air as the black whip implanted into the ground tunneled to her position. He threw her out of bounds for the others to catch and kept moving forward. Todoroki threw out a large column of ice that Midoriya destroyed with his fist and proceeded to move forward. Another barrage of ice was leveled at Midoriya, which was shattered by his punches. However, the barrage was just a screen, so the 2 girls could get to opposite sides of Midoriya. Beside them, each had 2 cannons that fired on Midoriya, while Todoroki launched more ice towards him. He stopped the Todoroki's ice attack with an air cannon, and he caught both ice cannonballs with a black whip before throwing both back at the girls, just shy of directly hitting them, the force of which threw both of them out of bounds. Only Todoroki and Midoriya were left in the arena. Midoriya could already feel the heat coming as the ice around the arena started to melt and evaporate away to steam. Midoriya speculated that Todoroki was mostly playing a supporting role due to the nature of his quirk and its wide area of effect. A large burst of flames emerged from Todoroki, heading straight for Midoriya. He jumped up above it, getting reacquainted with feeling gravity on him. Todoroki aimed upwards and fired another large swath of flames, which Izuku dispersed using his air cannon. Todoroki could feel the rumbling below him, and using his ice, he avoided the black whip coming from below him while constantly throwing flames at the airborne Midoriya. Midoriya rocketed down towards Todoroki, aiming to land a Manchester smash near him, but Todoroki blocked it with an ice shield. The 2 danced around the arena, with Todoroki trying to keep his distance from Midoriya while trying to spam fire and ice from range while dodging Midoriya's air cannon shots and black whips. Eventually, Midoriya managed to capture Todoroki's leg with a whip, but before he could try to pull, Todoroki would try to use the connection to freeze him in place, forcing Midoriya to dissipate the whip entirely. The back and forth continued for some minutes before Midoriya stopped the overwhelming energy, seemingly decreasing in intensity. He had powered down to 45% full cowling, and seeing this as an opportunity, Todoroki was about to hit him with a flash freeze heat wave. But before he could, Midoriya seemingly disappeared, reappearing right in front of him and shoving him out of the arena. Tsuyu had caught him before he crashed into the wall as she was slowly lowering him down towards the floor. Midoriya immediately set off to see if he was okay. "Sorry about that, Todoroki, I didn't mean to launch you so hard. Are you okay?" "I'm fine, Midoriya, you surprised me. I couldn't even perceive that you moved until it was too late." Todoroki replied, "Yeah, that was Fa-Jin. It allows me to store up kinetic energy and let it out explosively, increasing my strength or speed," Midoriya said in reply. Todoroki nodded. "Bakugou made mention of you potentially having even more abilities than the ones he knew you unlocked. Me, him, and Yaoyorozu attempted to create a strategy to win, but my planning was just inefficient." Yaoyorozu interrupted. She was wobbly on her feet, being helped by Uraraka. "No, that's not true, your plan almost worked. Deku's just amazing." She attempted to console her friend. "She's right, Midoriya, you sure have come a long way with how you use your black whip. My lessons must have paid off," Zero said, jumping into the conversation. "Yeah, Midoriya, I thought you were amazing even before you got your powers, but now you're something entirely different," Minta added. Midoriya waved off their praise and admiration, until Tsuyu approached him, asking a question. Midoriya, while I'm happy to know that you also learned something from me during our lessons, can you feel things using your black whip? Her posture was filled with embarrassment, hiding her face as she blushed with discomfort from the question being asked. Midoriya was curious at first about why she would be embarrassed by that question. But remember what he did. His face started to become extremely flushed, and he could only imagine how it would have looked. He exclaimed, "No, no, no, nothing like that. I guess, is just like any other object outside the body." Everyone started gathering around and laughing at their embarrassment. While the rest of the class was gathering around commenting on the match, Shinso asked Aizawa a question. Why did you even agree to this match after the school went to such an effort to get him back? He was only being held here due to his violations of the plans drawn by the principal and pro-heroes. With the re-establishment of the Safety Hero Commission office, it sped up the processing to allow the foreign pro-heroes to come into the country. Rough estimates give them as early as 2 weeks before they arrive in Japan. And once there, the strategy with Midoriya will continue, so letting him out a little early wouldn't really change much. As he was talking, he glanced over to the exit, where he saw Bakugou beginning to walk out. Figuring that this loss had a major impact on him, he thought it would be wise to go and talk to him. But as he stood up, the ground began to rumble, and the building itself shook like it had been hit by an earthquake. The students began to evacuate the building, looking up in the sky to see 3 large fires blossoming from the city. Interestingly, one of the fires was bright blue, signaling that only one person could be capable of it. Before Aizawa could give instructions on what to do, Endeavor and Hawks touched down next to them. He explains that he was in a conversation with Nezu and the other teachers of UA before the explosion started. Todoroki immediately approached his father and gestured towards the blue fire and smoke lighting up the night sky. That one has to be Toya. They're making a show to draw you out. I know. The question is, why now? What do they hope to achieve? Endeavor replied as he looked to Midoriya and was about to speak when suddenly, over his communication unit, the reports started to flood in. Namu. I repeat, Namu. I have been spotted in each explosion area. 3 Nomura are rampaging through the streets and have already overwhelmed the local heroes and law enforcement in those areas, requesting assistance immediately. Also, reportedly, a league of villains Dabai has been spotted alongside one of them. Be careful of other villains in the area of the other 2 Nomura as well. He pressed his hands to his ear and almost replied immediately, Me and Endeavor will handle the Namu with Dabai. Another voice on the comms also rang out, and Hawks was immediately recognized as the best genist. I will also join you. The damage there is causing the city has already tainted this city like unwashed denim. Endeavor started to relay what's going on to Aizawa and the rest of Class 1A. 3 Namu have been spotted in the disaster areas. Dabai is among them, so there may be other villains with the other 2 as well. Me, Hawks, and the best genist will go and handle the one where Dabai is located. And what about the other 2? Aizawa asked. Kami Woods, Mount Lady, and Ed Shot will head towards one, while Mirko, Ruku, and Shishido take the last, said Hawks. Aizawa looked displeased and asked, Won't Mirko be still recovering? She was critically injured more than the rest of us, not to mention she should still be getting acclimated to that prosthetic arm. Hawks simply shook his head and said, That's exactly what I tried to bring up, but she insisted that she was ready for a fight, and that, in her words, those bastards owed me a rematch. When she smells a fight, there is no stopping her from joining in once she sets her mind to it. We're not going to be fighting alone. Heroes from further distances have been called in to help as well, but we're closer. Our job is to limit the destruction and civilian casualties. Aizawa simply nodded as the pair was about to fly toward action. But before they could, Todoroki suddenly yelled out, Father, let me say I'm going with you. We said that we would handle Toya together. No, Shoto, I need you here to protect our family. Endeavor replied. Aizawa raised his eyebrow at this, thinking this attack is a diversion. A diversion or a trap. The Namu are limited even with all for one back into their fold. They wouldn't be able to make more so soon if at all given we destroyed their infrastructure and main lab. So sending your most valuable pieces out carelessly would be unwise for them. This is either a distraction for the heroes so they can attack elsewhere, or a trap hoping to lure out Midoriya so she can be captured. Midoriya would be safer here, behind the defenses of UA rather than out there fighting. Which is why I'm asking for you to stay behind as well, Midoriya. Midoriya was also prepared to offer himself to go out and fight with the other heroes, but after hearing their reasoning, he was contemptuous enough to stand by for now. He nodded in understanding and acceptance of Endeavor's proposal. Taking the opportunity, Takoyami and Hawks consulted as well before both Endeavors and Hawks left, racing towards the billowing smoke rising towards the sky. Endeavor and Hawks had arrived in the area to the sight of buildings in pieces and others engulfed in a combination of red and blue fire. Hawks immediately got to work, attempting to rescue stranded bystanders in the area under crushed debris or destroyed buildings, taking them and pointing them in the nearest direction to a bunker for safety. Endeavor was on the lookout for the Namu, but more importantly, the Toya. Suddenly a giant burst of blue flames came rushing towards the Hawks, which Endeavor rushed to intercept, sending forth an equally large force of flames to cancel it out. He spotted Toya lazily hanging off the roof of a building. He was hard to make out as he was wearing a dark robe that covered most of his body. He began to stand up and yell out to his father, "About time you showed up, Pops. For a second there, I thought you might have been giving me the cold shoulder. You know again, I mean." He began to lift off the roof, falling down towards the streets below, using his flames to slow his descent as he closed towards the ground below. As he landed, he launched another large column of flames towards the heroes, which Endeavor again cancelled out with a blast of his own. "Toya, please. I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but..." Another blast of blue flames was followed by a reply from Toya. "Good, cause I sure as hell ain't forgiving you." He launched another blue flame that was pierced by a jet burn from his father, forcing Toya to dodge out of the way. "Toya, please, not just me but your family as well. We all have things we want to tell you. Hate me if you must, but understand that they still think of you as a brother. They still care about you." Toya stopped his next attack and, for a moment, Endeavor believed he was getting through, but squashed that hope when he started hearing laughter. "Haha, you just don't get it now, do you, Pops? But thank you, you reminded me of why I'm here in the first place. I was jumping the gun a bit there." With that, Toya pressed a finger to his ear, which seemingly created a portal. The similar purple aura instantly tipped the heroes off that the culprit was Kurogiri. Toya was about to walk through the portal when he said one more thing. "Don't worry about the family, Pops. I'm going to visit them right now. They can say what they have to say, and it'll be their last words." As Toya stepped forward, his clothes suddenly tightened, stopping him from reaching the portal. The best genist had arrived at the scene. "That touching family reunion may have to wait until you are properly contained," the hero said. Toya turned his head to look at the hero. "God, your quirk is annoying." As he said, he whistled, and a black Namu came rushing, crashing through a building, swiping at the best genist, forcing him to release his hold on Dabai, allowing him to move. Oh, and by the way, those names aren't just near high-end anymore. They've been out a lot longer and grown more powerful there, much closer to that of a perfected Namu or Shigaraki now. Have fun, and as I said before, don't die on me now, Enji Todoroki. With that, he stepped through the portal, which closed up behind him almost immediately. Endeavor had no time to think about Toyota. He instantly rushed to the best genist. The massive black creature had growing crustaceans on its back, and in its hands, it would use these crustaceans as weapons to cut through the best genist's fiber string attacks. Endeavor launched a burst of flames at the creature. The flame washed over the creature's back, only to see that once the flame passed over, the crustaceans on his back grew in a defensive covering that completely negated Endeavor's attack. The monster stopped its attack and stood to its massive height of just under 3.5 meters. He turned to look at Endeavor, and to all three heroes' surprise, he spoke with clarity. "Endeavor, some number one, you turned out to be." Endeavor was almost too stunned to reply to the creature's comment. Hawks were the first to reply. "I'm surprised. You have the capability to even speak. Unlike my other brethren, we who have survived have evolved and gained back our consciousness. Then you don't need to follow all of one's orders anymore. You don't need to hurt people anymore because of the injustice brought up." The best genist began to say before dodging another attack before landing near Endeavor and Hawks. "Fool, do you think we became this way against our own will? We accepted the gifts the doctor gave us, and in the new society forged without heroes, we will rule. In other words, you were a monster even before you became like this. You will tell us where your masters are, and after that, you will burn for the destruction you caused." The monster laughed and only said you could try before the crustaceans started to envelop all of his body in thick, pale armor, signaling that the fight had begun. Back at UA, Midoriya was restless, pacing back and forth. About 30 minutes had passed since Endeavor and Hawks went towards the danger. He could still feel the sharp stings of his danger sense firing off occasionally, signifying the battles still being raged close by. The school itself was put into lockdown, sealing all the entrances into the school. While teachers were monitoring the surrounding areas, suddenly, Midoriya's sense of danger flared massively. Something big was happening, and close, almost too close for comfort. He was about to consult Aizawa about what's happening. But before he could, a large explosion shook the area near the dorms. Panic started set into Class 1A. Their family was located in the direction of the explosion. Aizawa managed to calm them down enough not to rush out the doors of the school, but understanding their plight, he was prepared to take the class in the direction of the explosion after being informed of similar explosions happening nearby, and that a group of villains suddenly appeared within the school grounds and near the dorm area. Izo is requesting that the students also take part in repelling the force. Flad and Class 1B were closer to the dorms than 1A and reported that they would protect the civilians while 1A was on their way. After being given the go-ahead, 1A launched into action, getting out of the doors of UA just to stop and gasp at the 7 purple swirling vortex. Almost in sync, 7 figures emerged from the portals, each sporting a robe that covered most of their body. The figure in the center spoke first. "Midoriya, your time is up." The haunting voice sent chills down Midoriya's spine. It was all for one. He raised his hand and shot out a large air cannon that forced all of 1A to dodge out of the way, striking the building and leaving a giant hole in the structure while glass shards flew everywhere. Nina used her acid to protect the ones near her from the falling shards, while Bakugou used his explosions to destroy the rest. Suddenly, red spikes shot out of one of the cloaked figure's robes, aimed directly at Nina, but were blocked by Kirishima's hardened hand. Chairs and decks started raining from the rooms above, crashing down on them, which Bakugou blew away again. Before his hands were wrapped in a red bandage, he was thrown away from the group. Aizawa was about to spring into action when suddenly he felt his prospect seem to bend and shape irregularly before being torn off completely, which would have caused him to fall, but he was caught by Shinso. All in all, one spoke again. "It seems that in my absence, you sure gained a lot of enemies that want revenge on you." Another of the cloaked individuals fired flames from his mouth that were blocked by Todoroki, forming an ice wall. The wall held at first, but an even stronger blue flame joined the attack, completely overwhelming the barrier and creating steam that crowded the area. In the midst of the smoke, a green beam caught Aizawa in the chest, knocking him and Shinso back into the wall of the school building. Bakugou, recovering from being thrown, came back firing into the smoke, only to have his shot reflect back at him. The smoke dispersed to show all for one standing there with his head revealed and a transparent glass-like barrier dissipating from his hands. Midoriya rushed to catch Bakugou falling from the air, only to receive an elbow for his efforts once he landed. "Now that his quirk is neutralized, feel free to reveal yourselves at your own discretion." The other 6 figures slowly started to shed their hoods, showing who they were, each of which shocked the students as each one was a villain from their past. Wolfram, Mummy, Slice, Chimera, Rappa, and Dabai all appeared before the class was ready to battle. Shinso had informed the class that Aizawa was blind and couldn't use his quirk to help, which made the situation even more dire. The heroes and the villains both prepared themselves for the coming battle, as something far away outside the bounds of their reality watched over not just them but all of the events unfolding. The creature lacked a face, but his temperament was one of displeasure. The creature sat and watched the events unfold as the fighting took place. If things continued down this road, the heroes would inevitably lose. Midoriya would be captured, and All for One would rule the country within the next few years and the world in another decade. The creature cared little for the feud between hero and villain, but that outcome wouldn't satisfy his interests. He sat and watched multiple battles commence and pondered what he could do to change the tide. Something intriguing caught his eye during the fight near the school. The teacher known as Aizawa was planning something with one of his students, Shinso, the creature believed to be his name. His power to control the mind was rather lackluster in detail, but maybe with his help and the right target, he could influence the events taking place. The creature continued to monitor the events unfolding. Aizawa presented himself as a target, hobbling along blind to the world around him. He was soon spotted and captured by a villian of floating mist. Tirajiri quickly apprehended the teacher, attempting to use him as a hostage. The teacher started to talk to the mist, speaking very low, seemingly angering it to shout. But the last words he spoke to it did not come from his mouth but those of another. Seeing this as his chance, the mysterious being dragged Kurogiri conscious out of his reality into his dimension, and was momentarily confused when the consciousness did not match the host's body. The consciousness resembled that of a regular man who had cloudy blue hair. He wore a blue karate gi over a black shirt with a black belt around his waist. He began to stir and awaken to the dark void, with stars littering the distance like he was in space. He turned around and immediately screeched in shock at the massive entity he was witnessing. He spoke almost immediately, "What the hell are you? And where the hell am I?" The large figure hunched over in a fetal position and began to speak, but its voice was much lower and closer than his body appeared. I am God, and this is my realm. Are you truly Kurogiri? Your Kanikonis looks nothing like your body, the figure claiming to be God replied. God, you say? Does that mean I'm officially dead? And I'm different because some bastard stole my body and changed it. My name's Aburo Shirakumo. There was a deep rumble that shook the space before God spoke again. I see. Your memories confirm your story. You are not dead. I simply called your consciousness here while it was being suppressed by another. I summoned you here to offer a deal that may greatly interest you. Aburo shook his head in disbelief and waved his hands comically. Hold on, you're God. I don't remember seeing you the first time I died. And if I'm not dead, then what do you want with me? What deal? You are trapped within your own body. I simply wish to free you from your chains. God had replied. As he spoke, a purple smoke started manifesting from Aburo's body, slowly forming a ball of mist with 2 yellow eyes. You will be in control. You could see your friends and family again. A nice offer, yes. Aburo was hesitant. This creature claiming to be God was definitely up to something. And what's in it for you? You don't seem like the giving type. All I shall take in return are 20 individuals from your world. You expect me to sacrifice 20 people just so I can live again. I'm a hero. I sacrificed myself to save people. I will not kill 20 people just to save myself. Aburo interrupted. I will not kill them, you misunderstood. Simply put, they will be transported elsewhere. However, the chance of them dying there is much greater than your world. God stated. That's the same difference. If they have a higher chance of death from your little excursion, then I'm not willing to go through with this deal. Aburo said. Oh, but if you don't, some of their deaths are guaranteed in these very moments. Turn around and look. Aburo did as instructed and turned to see a big portal open in front of him. At first, it was just black with nothing noticeable, but eventually it began to show video of a place that looked familiar to him. It was UA, but the building was heavily damaged and on the brink of collapse. Fighting was taking place in and around the courtyards. He saw what he imagined to be students fighting a group of villains, and despite their valiant effort, it was evident who was in the superior position. The picture changed to him, or more exactly, what became of him who was near him shocked him. Aizawa had grown up and was missing a leg and his right eye, but he was still alive. He was stunned for a moment, only focusing on how his former friend changed and how he's still the same. But the fighting was intense, and he seemed helpless, not participating at all. Aburo commented, "How do I know this isn't fake? That doesn't seem like the Aizawa I know to just mop around when the fighting is happening, even if he is disabled. I have no reason to lie to you. Your friend was struck blind by a villain and could not help with his quirk, as he would not know who quirk he would be erasing. He simply weighed the cost and benefits, and decided his actions accordingly." God replied, "That sounds like the Aizawa I know. But what of the other heroes? Surely this fight would draw more than enough attention to have waves upon waves of heroes show up." Aburo reasoned, "You have been unable to glimpse the world around you for some time. Due to prior events, heroes are no longer plentiful. And this attack was heavily planned so that reinforcements wouldn't be arriving soon." God responded, before several more portals opened up, showing other heroes facing off against what Aburo could only describe as monsters. A winged hero was currently dodging and weaving from the thrown projectiles of the beast while a hero covered in flames pierced the creature's body with a condensed flame. Another portal showed a similar creature, this one more feminine in its appearance, fighting a bunny hero, both their legs sticking at each other, sending out a powerful shockwave that broke the street below them. Before, a dragon swooped in to try and attack the black figure from above, only for the creature to dodge out of the way. Another portal showed a dark creature locked in battle with a giant woman. Despite the woman's size, her strength could not match that of the monster as she was thrown to the ground. Another hero, who was mostly wood, appeared and tried to wrap up his opponent, but was simply tossed around by the black figure into a building. Many other heroes were seen through the portal, helping their wounded comrades or civilians leave the area. The last portal showed another blast from his past. Hizashi was there, using his quirk on the villain, keeping time for bystanders to leave the area. He was accompanied by a golem hero that created and moved the earth below the villain's feet. One of the villains was a hulking black mass, but not like the creature he saw before. He still had a human face and features. Leading the assault, he would crash through the barriers set up by the golem and deflect bullets that were shot at him by a cowboy hero. The portal played each of the different sections of fighting that took place in and around his former high school. The heroes were winning in certain places but falling in others. No matter the case, however, casualties were being taken from both sides. What do you gain by helping them? And even if I accept your deal, how could I just change the tide of the battle? Aburo inquired. My goal, as always, is the destruction of humanity. Before you speak, this course of action ensures mutually assured destruction. At the current trajectory, the villain will accomplish their goal and, with it, subjugate the world under them. But you can change that. Accepting my offer ensures hope that heroes will win. You can't turn the tide of this battle, but this battle will never have occurred in the first place. I will even restore the destruction caused by it. God bargained. Aburo sat in concentration for a moment, taking in all this information. He wasn't the best with critical thinking, which was always Shota's department. He thought of God's words and stated, I assume these 20 individuals you selected are not random in their importance. You would be correct. The individuals I have selected are those that could prove rather harmful in breaking the stalemate the heroes and villains would have in this offer. They will not be gone forever, mind you. They will only be gone for 4 months. If they so happen to die in the other world, they will also die here. God said, I don't reckon you're going to tell me who they are. Only silence was his answer. He sat and pondered his options. On one hand, there is a chance that the heroes could win without intervention. But looking through the portals again, he doesn't know what the villain's objective truly was. Such a coordinated attack meant something more than just destruction and carnage. According to God, if they achieved it, it would mean total dominance over the villains. But could he trust his words? On the other hand, if he's not lying and he accepts the deal, he could prevent any of this from happening. And he could also reverse all the damages done in the attack. The downside is that 20 people would be stranded in a world they or he knows nothing about, but that's even more dangerous than their current one. But if those heroes are strong enough to turn the tide with their presence, maybe they would be able to survive the 4 months and return safely. Could he really take that chance though? He deliberated for some time before finally coming to an answer. He spoke and said, I accept your offer. With that the world rumbled again and the ball of purple mist began to draw closer. Extending his hand, Aburo touched the orb, which slowly turned the purple orb a sky blue color. The orb went past his arm and into his chest. Before everything turned white, Aburo heard one more thing from God. Do not speak of me or the deal we made to anyone, or you shall suffer the consequences. Aburo simply laughed and thought there was always a catch and hoped Shota and Hisashi wouldn't be too mad at him for this. The battle was looking bleak for the heroes in front of UA. The building had completely collapsed during the midst of the chaos. The destruction segregated the students from each other and forced them to fight their own battles against opponents who, thanks to the aid of All for One, had their specific weaknesses at heart. Midoriya was no different. His fight with the great villain only highlighted his large gap in experience over the child, while his multitude of quirks kept him on his toes and on the back foot. His mind was also worried about his friends' battles and how they were doing, but the great villain gave him no time to even steal glances at his classmates. He did see the warp villain behind him with Aizawa in tow. At first Midoriya thought he had been captured. Seeing the boy's dismay and focus on behind him, All for One turned around and laughed. He praised Kurogiri for his efforts and ordered him to bring Aizawa to him, but he did not move. All for One ordered again, but Kurogiri still did not move. Suddenly Kurogiri's face started to warp and shift, flickering wildly and eventually bursting. There was nothing but a wall of black that everyone saw within the city of Musutafu, the black consuming the city whole, creating a dome before turning to a blinding white light that slowly receded back towards its origins. Aizawa's blindness was starting to clear, thankfully, ready to help in the ongoing battle, when a voice from his past suddenly helped shocked him. Thanks for keeping my glasses all this time. I knew it was a great idea. He blinked his eyes multiple times, trying to get his vision back, desperately trying to see the voice speaking to him. He opened his eyes to see who he thought was Kurogiri, at first going by how he was dressed, but as he looked up and saw his face, he immediately clung to his former friend, not caring about the how or whys for this single moment in time, just embracing that his friend has returned to him once more. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 2. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Also check out the story and author Lumpay Spark 3 on FANFICTIONnet. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.